Good morning, everyone. We'll call our meeting to order. First item we have is a hearing on the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards. Merle Riedel with KLRD Budget Overview. Welcome, committee, Merle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Merle Riedel. I am a fiscal analyst with Kansas Legislative Research Department. I'll be reviewing the budget request for the Kansas Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Training. Also joining me here today is the fairly new Executive Director for CPOST, Doug Schrader, who is in the audience. If you would, I would refer you to the budget analysis. Got an orange line across the top. Says Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. Just looking on one page, on page one, a quick reminder a little bit of who CPOST is. CPOST is located in Wichita. It is a regulatory body that provides for qualified, trained, and professional peace officers. Primarily does this by regulating law enforcement officers. This is done by maintaining a central registry of law enforcement officer, demographics, qualifications, and employment history that's made available to law enforcement agencies when they are hiring officers. The CPOST also conducts investigations and hearings related to violations of the Kansas Law Enforcement Act, which may result in suspension, revocation, or denying a certification of a law enforcement officer. In the budget analysis, I'll move on to page 4 to kind of get to the budget request. A couple items just to review on that page. You'll see 2 funds. The agency is largely funded with special revenue funds that are derived from docket fees. You can see their primary operating fund is the Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training Fund. This is the main fund used for their salaries, wages, operations, etc. They also have a local law enforcement training reimbursement fund that is used to reimburse local communities for sending individuals to law enforcement academies. You'll see that, you'll note that the local law enforcement training fund is really pass-through funds by statute, cannot really be utilized for agency operations. Looking on page 5, a quick review of the agency's estimate. About midway down, the agency estimates a revised FY 2022 expenditures of $917,000, all from special revenue funds, which is an increase of $44,563 above the FY 22 approved amount. A couple of major adjustments there. You'll see item 2 involved filling a vacant position and overlap. Essentially, a new executive director was brought on board, and the prior executive director remained on staff for a period of about 2 months to provide cross-training to the new executive director. And they also adjusted an investigator position from part-time to full-time. Item number 3 is the agency's supplemental request for replacement of 1 vehicle. The agency maintains a fleet of 3 vehicles. 2 of them have reached the end of their lifespan, and they are requesting to utilize special revenue funds to replace those vehicles. You'll see a replacement of 1 vehicle in FY22, and then later in FY23, you'll see a replacement requested for the 2nd vehicle. Item 4 is the final adjustment related to municipality aid. Again, this refers to the local law enforcement training fund that provides reimbursement to communities for law enforcement training. You'll see expenditures from that fund decreased by about $21,845 below the FY22 approved amount, and that is primarily due to decreasing revenue from docket fees to that fund. At the bottom of page 5, item number 5, you'll see the governor's recommendation. The governor concurs with the agency's revised estimate and recommends no changes. Moving on to page 7, agency requests $889,326, all from special revenue funds for FY 2023. This is an all funds decrease of $28,053 below the FY 22 revised estimate. Reviewing some of the adjustments, you'll see item 1 is the enhancement. Again, this relates to vehicle replacement, so this would be replacement of a 2nd vehicle. The agency does note these vehicles are primarily used by agency staff. It's used to transport records and evidence. You'll also see under item 2 is computer software and maintenance. The agency increased expenditures by $6,155 in FY 2023 due to increase in database server space required to support that central registry. You'll see item 3, there is a slight decrease in computer equipment purchases. Item 4 is attorney fees related to anticipated increases in needs for attorneys related to federal law. And then finally, all other adjustments, there's a decrease in expenditures from FY 22 to 23 in the amount of $20,000, primarily due to the overlap of those executive directors that increased expenditures in FY 22 but will not occur in FY 23. And if you move on to the final page on page 10, you'll see a list of some of the performance measures for the agency. Mr. Chairman, that concludes a very quick overview for the agency, and I could stand for questions.
Thank you, Merle. Anyone have any questions for Merle? Seeing none, thank you, Merle. Did anyone have any questions for the new director?
If I may, have just a few minutes of your time to introduce myself. My name is Doug Schrader. I did take over for Gary Steed that retired this past August. I appreciate the opportunity, Chair Billinger and committee members, to address you today. The Kansas Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training is devoted to advancing the law enforcement profession. The Commission adopts and enforces regulations that are necessary to ensure that law enforcement officers are adequately trained and certified, as well as investigate lapses of integrity and revoke certification when necessary. Post is funded solely by docket fees collected by municipal courts. Future financial concerns include the unreliable and aging fleet of vehicles, cybersecurity concerns, physical office space security concerns, and meeting stakeholder requests for central registry capabilities. Docket fees have been declining for the past 5 years, but still, currently, we would support an FY22 and FY23 budget. Should the trend continue, we will need to seek increasing docket fees or explore alternative sources of funding. Thank you for your time, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Doug? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to committee. How many vehicles do you have in the fleet?
We have 3 right now.
3, okay.
Yeah, and I am looking to, in the next year, replace one of those, or this year 1 and next year 1, and I hope that we'll get by with 2 vehicles. So I think we're going to narrow our fleet, but make them more reliable so they're more usable.
The other question I have is when you talk about training, how many people do you train in a year's time?
So our agency, by statute, runs the central registry that records all officers training in the state of Kansas. Last time I ran a check, there was about 8,300 officers. They do require certain categories of training, so the central registry does that. We don't, by practice, really put on the training or instruct. However, we have had a renewed effort this last fall to get in touch with administrators, police chiefs, and sheriffs to explore how the post can better partner with them.
Do they have to periodically go in for retraining?
Officers, yes. Every year, officers are required to get 40 hours of continuing education. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when a new officer comes on, the bulk of that cost for training it's paid by their local unit of government, isn't it?
Yes, for the most part. So Kansas's model is as soon as somebody is hired, our office gives them a provisional certification. That provisional certification is good for the period of 1 year. However, it's also written that they must attend the next available academy. Last I talked to the folks out there, it's only about a 3 to 6 week waiting period. Once they complete the academy, basic academy, they are given their certification. And during that time, they are an employee of whatever jurisdiction hired them, city or county.
And then that 40 hours of continuing education, that's provided and overseen by their local unit of government, or their local police
Correct.
department as well.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you being here.
Yes, sir.
Committee, I think we'll also go ahead and do the deliberations on this. Does anyone have any questions or changes as to what the governor proposed? Are we all okay with it? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we accept the governor's recommendation for the Kansas Commission on Peace Officers Standards and Trainings for 21 through 23.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second by Senator Fagg. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item we have is our hearing on the Kansas Sentencing Commission, and we'll have Merle Riedel again from KLRD with the budget overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be looking at the budget analysis for the Kansas Sentencing Commission, titled Kansas Sentencing Commission at the top. Nice orange band. All right. We did implement some new budget analysis formats this year, try to make it easier for people to understand. So when you see the red band, that means public safety. So looking on page 1 of the budget analysis, just a quick review of what exactly the Sentencing Commission is. Sentencing Commission primarily has 2 functions. Their first function is to be essentially a data analysis center for criminal justice information. They use that information to help maintain the sentencing guidelines and also to help project prison populations and provide legislators with analysis of policy changes related to legislation. The commission also runs the SB 1 or Senate Bill 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Program. This is a treatment for offenders that serve under community supervision. So those offenders may be on a probation status or a parole status. Looking at the bottom of page 1, actually I'm going to refer you to page 6. If we look on page 6 below the box, you'll see the legislative approved. You will see the 2021 legislature approved a budget of $10 million, including $9.8 million SGF for the Sentencing Commission for FY22. There was an adjustment to that amount. There was an SGF reappropriation totaling $3.8 million that reappropriated from FY21 into FY22. Going on to the agency estimate, the agency requests a revised estimate of $13.6 million, including $13.6 million SGF in FY22. This is an all funds decrease of $137,488 and an SGF increase of $14,894 from the FY22 approved amount. So some of the major or some of the more significant adjustments, you will see item 2 is this agency's supplemental request. The agency requests $17,605 SGF for the initial phase of a 2-year salary adjustment plan as recommended by a third-party salary study in FY22. That study concluded that the majority of agency positions were near or below the market rate, which has resulted in turnover of skilled positions that are in demand among other justice-related entities. So you'll see there's the initial phase, and then when we get to the next year, you'll see the majority of the salary adjustment request is in FY 2023. Item number 2 relates to 2021 HB 2026. This was a piece of legislation implemented last year or passed last year during the 2021 legislature that provided substance abuse treatment for offenders on diversion. That policy was passed, but no additional funds were provided in the last session, so the agency is essentially requesting funds to support implementation of that. Agency revised estimate includes an increase of $166,470 SGF for the expansion of an online treatment provider payment system to accommodate provisions of HB 2026, which, as I mentioned, allows for community-based substance abuse treatment for certain drug offenders who have entered diversion. Moving on to page 7, I'm looking at item 5. the 2003 SB 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Adjustment. The agency's revised estimate includes a decrease of 341,772 SGF from the SB 123 Substance Abuse Treatment Program. This is largely attributed to decreased admissions to the program related to court delays resulting from the pandemic. These expenditures are payments that are provided to providers for community-based substance abuse treatment. And those are the significant adjustments for FY 2022. If we look at the governor's recommendation towards the bottom of page 7, the governor recommends expenditures of $9.8 million, including $9.8 million SGF. This is an SGF decrease of $3.8 million below the agency's FY 22 revised estimate. Governor's major adjustments include SGF reappropriation lapse. As I mentioned earlier, there was $3.8 million that reappropriated from 21 to 22. Governor's recommending to lapse those funds and decrease expenditures by that amount. And then the second item is supplemental adjustment. The governor does not recommend the 17,605 SGF for the initial phase of the agency's salary enhancement. However, the recommendation does include funding for the final phase of the adjustment plan in FY 2023 with modifications. Moving on to page 9, we'll briefly discuss the FY 23 request. The agency requested $10.7 million, including $10.6 million for FY 23. This is an all funds decrease of $2.9 million and an SGF decrease of $2.9 million. So some of the significant adjustments you'll see under item 1 is again that salary adjustment plan. The agency requests $91,082 all SGF for the final phase of a 2-year salary adjustment plan as recommended by that third-party salary study. Agency's second enhancement, they are requesting additional funds to support the implementation of 2021 HB 2026. The agency requests $764,293 SGF to sustain implementation of those modifications. Item number 3, substance abuse treatment program adjustment. The agency requests a decrease of 3.6 million SGF from the SB 123 program for 2023. That decrease was primarily attributed to SGF funds that the agency anticipated would be available in 2022 and would not be available in FY 2023. That's the significant adjustments for 2023. I'll review the governor's recommendation on page 10. Governor recommends expenditures of $9.9 million, including $9.9 million SGF. This is a decrease of $768,293 below the agency's FY 2023 request. Governor's recommendation includes the following adjustments. Enhancement modification for the salary adjustment plan. The governor concurs with the agency's enhancement request to add 91,082 SGF for a salary adjustment plan, but recommends the plan be implemented in 1 year rather than 2, and excludes the executive director from this plan for FY 2023. The recommendation would include the executive director with agency staff, also as part of the statewide 5% cost of living increase. And item 7, 2021 HB 2026, that's a tough one to rattle off. Implementation, the governor does not recommend adding expenditures of $764,000 to sustain implementation. Sir, pages 11 and 12 go into detail on those enhancement requests, and towards the back you can see some additional information on performance measures. So I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Merle. So why is the governor not recommending the 764,000 SGF for HB 2026? Do you know what the reasoning behind that?
I couldn't be certain, Mr. Chairman. The governor's recommendation does not specify why that funding was not recommended. I would say that there are those expenditures, so she did not recommend the increase in 2023. there is equivalent expenditures in FY 2022 that the agency would largely be allowed to use some reappropriated funds. The governor lapsed the majority of that reappropriation of 3.8 million, but she did leave adequate funds for implementation in FY 22, but does not provide that same funding in FY 23.
And will they be able to operate? Do they have money somewhere else they can use for this? I mean, how are they going to be able to continue? I mean, they start at 1 year and no funding the second year.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that would be a good that could be a question for the agency to respond, but just looking at the agency's request is they do provide a fairly clear explanation that there is interest in this diversion program. They've received some feedback from district attorneys in Wichita that they are interested in utilizing this program.
Okay, any questions for Merle? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Merle, thank you for your presentation. Under the salary adjustment, salary study, what did that cost? You know, we're talking 14 employees he's talking about, and they done a study. I just wonder what kind of money they put into that.
You're asking what was the cost of the study itself?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you that. I'd have to look that in for. I'd have to look that up, sir.
I find that interesting in who it was.
Any other questions? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed on the treatment program, is it being used statewide or is the highest use in Wichita?
It's my understanding that program is available statewide. I think it does have larger or a high volume of use in the urban areas, to include Wichita. But it's my understanding it is available statewide.
And a portion of that $764,293, that would go for the payment system. Is that correct?
That's correct. So of that 764,000, if you look on page 12, that really breaks down into two parts under request 3. A portion of that goes to pay actual treatment providers. The majority of that 700,000 would go for that. So 618,578 actually pays treatment for the provision of those services. And then of that 145,715 is used to maintain the online payment system. That's a fairly efficient system for providers to invoice for payment. So yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Merle? Seeing none, thank you, Merle. Next, we'll have Scott Schultz, the Executive Director of the Kansas Sentencing Commission. Man, I'm having trouble with that word. Scott, welcome to committee. Maybe you can fill in some blanks here.
Mr. Chair, good morning. Great to be with all of you. Yes, I'd be happy to kind of fill in the blanks here. On behalf of the commission, we're happy to be with you today. Maybe starting from your right to left, Senator Fagg, the salary study that we did was with McGrath. This was a study, I think we spent about $7,000 to actually do that study. The SB 123 program is a statewide program. We have about 140 treatment providers in your jurisdictions that provide treatment to court-ordered normally possession of controlled substances. Some of them are small sales now, as SB 18 was actually passed. And finally, as far as HB 2026, this was a diversion program it's kind of taking 123 and adding it to a diversion context. This is a program that is discretionary with the prosecutors. They don't have to participate in it, but it does then provide state-paid substance abuse treatment to those folks that would be on diversion, allows them to not have a felony on their record, and gets them treatment and hopefully success. So the 764,000, we are recommending that this committee recommend the governor's rec for 22 and 23. The rationale essentially is due to shortages in community corrections folks, shortages in clinicians that are substance abuse treatment providers. We have not received the invoices that we normally do pre-pandemic. And so we're still seeing the fallout of that. Due to that, we still have a reserve or surplus of funds for this particular program. So while that is a lot of money, almost it is $750,000, we still believe we can actually absorb that cost. If we can't, within, starting in 23, I'll probably be back here talking with you about it. But at this point, that law was passed back in July. We have yet to receive an offender for 2026. The program took a little while to get our vendor to get everything programmed in. We have not seen 6 months in now. So we're not expecting a whole lot for the rest of the fiscal year. And so hopefully within 23, that will actually start up. I don't see that as the floodgates being open. It's more going to be a trickle. So hopefully that responds to your questions.
Thank you, Scott. Was there any other additional questions for Scott? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Scott, how much you got in reserve? You're saying that the 764 you could absorb, but how much extra do you have?
Well, it just kind of depends. We're right at, I'd have to go back and look at our, as far as 123. And keep in mind, the Senate Bill 123 funds, those are almost all pass-through funds. We're basically the bank. We're holding those to pay out to the treatment providers. So I'd have to go back and look at about halfway through the fiscal year here. I think we were somewhere in the neighborhood of 38 to 40% of what we spent rather than 50%. So just to kind of give you an idea, we spend about upwards of about $500,000 a month on the program. And so it's been down because of those invoices.
Senator Petty.
Senator, that would be correct. We have not received a single invoice yet for that. Some of that, I think, has to do with the fact that, again, we were trying to get our vendor, Beacon Health Systems, in a position where they have to reprogram and be able to accept not only 123 folks, but also these diversion folks. And so that was taking a little bit of time. We're at that point right now where we can receive those folks. But up until now, we've not received any of those. I do anticipate that Mark and his folks will be sending more to us. We have a very robust program in Wyandotte County. The DA's office has a very robust county diversion program there as well.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we accept the governor's recommendations for FY 21-23 for the Kansas Sentencing Commission.
I have a motion. We have a second by Senator Petty. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Committee, that's what we had for 10:30, so we are adjourned. Thank you.